Who would want to follow that? Well, Kat Boyd is going to follow that. Kat is one of the founding members of the Radical Independence Campaign, and she's going to speak to us on the ways in which we can, as ordinary people, take some power back by engaging in politics. Please welcome Kat.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure to follow someone like Jim. But I just wanted to share some of my own experiences about politics, about radical independence, and also where I think we can go from here. And I think we'll start in one of the most important political events that I've been involved in over the referendum campaign was probably our last Radical Independence conference that took place after the referendum, and it was our biggest conference yet, with over 3,000 people gathered from all over Scotland to discuss the ways forward for our campaign post-September the 18th. And on that day, we pledged a campaign on 5 points about austerity, about campaigning against privatisation, against fracking, TTIP, Trident, and for better working conditions. And we called that the People's Vow, because we still don't accept that the politicians who signed up to their own vow on the front page of the Daily Record had the best interests of ordinary people in Scotland at heart. We still believe that change needs to be fought for from below, in our communities, in our workplaces and in our organisations. During the referendum campaign, a yes vote was a way for us to take power back for ourselves, away from those who thought they had the right to govern Scotland for good. It was a way for us to revolt against alienation from Westminster, and now we're here. We've generated a great momentum with our collective power. The question is, what are we going to do with it? And I know that the general election's only a few weeks away, and I know that a lot of people are really excited about it. And yes, it is. It's a general election like no other. I do think that time is running out on the current political settlement. I think that's quite obvious. But regardless of the outcome in 2015, Scotland will still be marginalised, and ordinary people in Scotland will still be marginalised because we'll still be tied in to a failing Westminster system. But there are new opportunities depending on the outcome, and I'm quite optimistic about what's possible. And just so they know, any Tory in Scotland or beyond, if they are able to form government, every single ordinary person in Scotland and other nations in the UK, we must resist another 5 years of Tory rule. We need to make Scotland ungovernable because we can't take any more Tories. And I think we can make it ungovernable for them, because the ways that Scotland has changed over the last few years has given us new confidence to campaign for the things that we believe in. Because we've got a strong and proud tradition as working class people for standing up and fighting for change. It was 100 years ago in Glasgow where people organised the rent strikes. It was ordinary people in Scotland who stood up against the poll tax. It was us that fought the bedroom tax, and we won. We showed that we are political, and when we organise, we can affect change. And the days of a careerist political class dominating our lives are numbered. During the referendum, when we stood up and stood together, we proved our tenacity, because when the entire might of the British establishment was against us, we still believed that another Scotland was possible. And we proved something else as well that's been touched on by the other speakers, that when our votes actually matter, we'll turn up in numbers like never before to participate. Because the referendum overturned politics as normal. It transcended party leaders and manifestos and traditions. And a vote for many of us for independence was an opportunity to transform not just Scotland, but our own lives, and to shape and influence our futures. For decades now, the political consensus has said that ordinary people, young people in particular, are apathetic and we don't care about politics. But regardless of whether you voted yes or no in the referendum itself blew that picture apart, And I think that the Yes movement turned what could have been another dull election into a carnival of resistance against austerity. Because I think what stops people wanting to vote is that it's all the same. Vote Labour, vote Tory, get austerity, get Trident. For those of us in radical independence, we want to make sure that all the energy that's been generated during the campaign is entrenched in our communities across Scotland and that it can grow. Jim's right, we need to grow this new confidence. And that idea of self-education, I think, has been so important over the last few years. Because during that, every meeting that you went to, every conversation that you had on the doorsteps, or in your workplace, or with your family, or every time you chose not to believe what the papers were saying, we learned something new. And the sum of all of that knowledge, the sum of all that accumulated learning means that it doesn't matter that we weren't born into obscene privilege or educated at Eton. It doesn't matter that we're not millionaires. We have the beginning of a new awareness about politics and power. And those conversations that we're still having with each other about the issues that matter can light a little spark, can light something up. And I think that gives us good grounding for the future. This is the reason why campaigning and political activism matters. When you get involved in a campaign, at first it might seem small and that no one's listening, but very, very quickly you can turn things around. Because I vividly remember the very first time we spoke about the Radical Independence campaign, and it was 10 of us in a drafty wee room next to Central Station in Glasgow, talking about what the hell we were going to call this community-based campaign that was arguing for a left-wing yes vote. I remember what that was like. But when people started to get active, we showed that we could really change the way the conversation is growing, and it's still happening in Scotland just now. There's huge public education initiatives to raise awareness about fracking. There's meetings still going on about Trident, about the debates that are happening in Westminster. There's huge campaigns around TTIP, the trade deal that will undermine any possibility of real sovereignty. There's campaigns that are here today, like the Live and Rent campaign, that's going from strength to strength, fighting against private landlords who are profiting from the human right of shelter. There can be no doubt, I think Scotland has changed forever. And looking to the future, we need to seek out a path to make sure we can continue to challenge austerity in Scotland, as well as the cuts that will come from Westminster. I think that we can begin to organise for new types of political power, that we can control ourselves for the Holyrood elections in 2016. I think we need to ensure that we've still got hope and that we've still got something to fight for. And that's why I'm really glad that branches like this one are starting up after the referendum. Because I think that radical independence has shown that a potential new left-wing electoral force exists in Scotland. Imagine for a second that the forces behind radical independence, socialist parties, Greens, disaffected trade unionists, anti-NATO nationalists, working class people, all banded together on the same terms that we fought during the referendum as an electoral option. We could become Scotland's second political option. We could displace Labour's link with the trade unions, and we could begin to give power back to thousands of people who are trapped in chronic, low-paid jobs on zero-hours contracts. We could create a legitimate alternative to politics as normal again. Because I never want people to tell me that Scotland's got some of the lowest voter turnouts in Europe, that young people don't care about politics. We need to make sure there's never another generation that feels like they've got no say in their own future. And I think that part of that is having diverse political options in elections that give people hope for something better. Because if the future of Holyrood is simply Labour versus the SNP, then I think we'll be in a sorry state. Because we're already starting to see that some parties are more interested in political point scoring than providing a vision for their traditional working class voters. If Scottish politics is dominated by that Labour versus SNP picture, I'm worried that the apathy would grow and the ordinary people would be left without a voice and would have no party in power to represent us. But I don't think it has to be like this. I think we can make changes from here. We need a force in Scotland that stands up for working class people against benefit sanctions and privatisation, that demands a redistribution of wealth and power, and I think we can make that happen. And I know there is people here who voted no, and of course I still want Scotland to be independent, but not just for the sake of it. That was never the point of the Radical Independence campaign. We might have wanted Scotland to be independent, but we wanted working class people to have a strong and powerful voice, and we still want that today. Throughout the history of Scotland and beyond, there are many examples of ordinary people coming together to change things. And I know we did that during the referendum. And although we might not have won on the 18th of September, we won something else quite spectacular instead. A renewed opportunity, an educated political population, the thing that the elites are most afraid of. And I think that we can use all of that energy to begin to democratise Scotland from the bottom up, and that we can begin again to challenge a political system that shut us out for decades. And I hope you will all consider getting active in the branch of radical independence, and that we can have the conversation about the way forward. Thank you.